Hello there. Thank you so much for joining us. My name's Eric McKay. You're watching News Channel Nebraska. Let's take a look at our top headlines today. Law enforcement releasing more details on this week's double murder in Bloomfield, but questions still remain. Luke Stera has the latest.
A small community rocked by a double murder, and the motive behind it is still not clear following a press conference Wednesday morning. Law enforcement identified the two victims in the crime, 77-year-old Curtis Strom and 49-year-old William Reffitt. The preliminary investigation shows just after 9:30 on Tuesday morning, authorities got a call about a possible shooting at Kurt's Lanes and Dining, a bowling alley in Bloomfield.
Preliminary investigation has shown that Reed went to the bowling alley Tuesday morning with a shotgun, initiated an argument with Mr. Reffitt. He then shot Mr. Reffitt. Moments later, Reed shot Mr. Strom. Mr. Strom was not involved with the argument between Reed and Mr. Reffitt, and then shortly after, Reed left the bowling alley.
Following this, the Nebraska State Patrol says Reed fled the bowling alley. In their investigation, 25-year-old Elias Reed is believed to have traveled several miles west of Bloomfield with his girlfriend, 27-year-old Kaylin Sweezy, where she allegedly disposed of the shotgun. Troopers found the weapon as well as cash that was stolen from the bowling alley. Captain Dane Hicks says Reed was not an employee of the bowling alley and there were no witnesses at the time of the shooting. Knox County Sheriff Don Henry says the crime happening in as small of a community like Bloomfield is shocking.
I don't remember there being a homicide in Bloomfield for years. We don't have a lot in Knox County, quite truthfully. Anytime we do, to say it's not shocking would be an understatement, because it is. And this isn't what human nature does. So.
He says schools in the area were put into lockdown throughout the day after the shooting out of precaution. Investigators were done at the scene around 9 o'clock Tuesday night. Reed was arrested and jailed in Knox County on 2 counts of first-degree murder as well as robbery, and Sweezy was arrested for tampering with evidence and sits in Antelope County Jail. As of now, there's no word for when the two will have their first appearances in court. In Bloomfield, I'm Luke Stera, News Channel Nebraska.
A bill to try and address Nebraska's child care workforce crisis is advancing with bipartisan support. Senator John Frederickson's priority bill would expand eligibility for the federal child care subsidy program to all child care workers, meaning they would all get free care. The legislature adopted an amendment which would cap spending for the program at $10 million a year and sunset the program in its entirety in 2026. Senator Frederickson said a similar program in Iowa is already making a difference, and other states are looking at making the same change.
The lack of workers in the child care industry and high level of staff turnover is hindering the ability of other folks to get to work as well. It's time to address this problem in a direct way. It's time for, as the state chamber calls, a game changer.
Elsewhere in the legislature, a proposed bill would adopt a provision that would allow parents in Nebraska to opt out of newborn screenings for religious or other reasons. Senator Ben Hansen of Blair introduced the measure. He says the way it works now, parents that refuse screenings can face not getting a birth certificate, litigation, even potentially losing the child.
Only if the parent actually engages with the hospital or the doctor and says, hey, look, I do not want this test on my child. It's not like whenever you go to a hospital and have a baby, the doctor says, okay, so do you want to have this test done? They don't even ask that question. It's just done.
But officials who've managed Nebraska's newborn screening program say they're concerned about treatable disorders that might be missed if parents opt out of newborn screenings.
Every year, and just in Nebraska, somewhere between 50 and 60 babies with one of these clinically significant diseases gets identified and gets into treatment and has these terrible things prevented.
Nebraska is one of just 3 states, joining Michigan and West Virginia as the only states with no provisions for parents to opt out of newborn screenings for their babies. Nebraska Congressman Don Bacon facing a challenger in the May primary, a challenger who's gotten the backing of the Nebraska GOP party. So who is Dan Fry, and could he win in District 2? I had a chance to visit with Joe Jordan about one of the most intriguing political matchups this spring. This is going to be a contested race even before we get to the general election. Tell us about the challenger to Don Bacon in Dan Fry.
Really curious, Eric. Of the 5 Nebraska Republicans on Capitol Hill right now, only one is being challenged in the primary by what you'd consider a serious challenge, and that's Congressman Don Bacon. He's being hit from his right by an Omaha businessman by the name of Dan Fry. And Fry, no stranger to this, he tried this before in 2014.
Why 10 years later? What's going on?
Well, if you look at everything that motivated me to run last time around, it was the size and scope of the government. It was the spending. It was the border. It was, at that point in time, we were still dealing with this new healthcare system, Obamacare, where we're going to repeal it and replace it. But if you look at all of those metrics, which one of them has gotten better? None of them.
In 2014, Fry came within 6 points of knocking off Republican Congressman Lee Terry. Arguably weakened by that slim victory, Terry lost in November to Democrat Brad Ashford. Waiting to see how all this plays out is Democrat State Senator Tony Vargas, who narrowly lost to Bacon 2 years ago.
Now, will Vargas get a rematch with Don Bacon? And if he does, is Don Bacon going to be weaker because he had this contest in the primary against Dan Fry? Those questions are hanging out there. And Eric, if Fry wins, here's the big question in the 2nd Congressional District. Dan Fry, admittedly a true Trumper. How does he win in a general election against Tony Vargas, given the fact that 4 years ago, President Biden beat Mr. Trump by 7 points in the 2nd Congressional District? So it's been that blue dot. And how does a Republican win that blue dot if he comes at it from the right side of the party? Those questions are clearly hanging out there right now.
Absolutely. And in a race that has become one to watch on the national scene as well, a lot of folks are going to be paying attention to what happens in May before we even get to November. Joe Jordan, thank you so much for joining us today.
Thanks, Eric. Appreciate it.
A familiar face in political circles in central Nebraska is aiming for a spot in the unicameral. Michael Shively gives us a look at the District 37 race.
Kearney's mayor is making his experience and ability to listen the cornerstones of his campaign for state legislature. Stan Klaus is one of 2 candidates running to replace Senator John Lowe, who is term limited. He's served as Kearney mayor since 2006 and has been on the city council for 20 years. He thinks his experience would help the unicameral avoid making mistakes with the details.
Some of the things that we see going on down there could really negatively impact what we've spent a number of years developing. And it's not intentional, it's just those unintended consequences. So I think you need to have that experience and bring that to the table and say, well, this is a great idea, but here's the other side to it.
Klaus, a Republican, talked with NCN at a campaign fundraiser on Monday. Proposals on property tax reform are among the discussions catching his attention. He doesn't support the EPIC option consumption tax. He's hesitant on Governor Jim Hillen's 40% cut that could involve a sales tax hike, but thinks it's a good place to start.
When you start off clear on one side, then everybody starts getting together and you bring it back to something that might be a little more reasonable or something that's workable. And I think that's where he's at now. Now he's got their attention, everybody's going to start working towards it.
Klaus says his ability to understand and listen would be his greatest attribute in Lincoln.
Too many times we go off and we're not listening to what the real issues are and then coming together to try to solve them. And that's what we do in Kearney. And that's what Nebraskans do. But somehow we've lost some of that.
Legislative District 37 includes Kearney, Gibbon, Shelton, and surrounding areas. Fellow Republican Lana Peister is also running for the post. Any other candidates have until March 1st to file to run. In Kearney, Michael Shively, News Channel, Nebraska.
State lawmakers continue to talk property tax reform, and that's putting county officials in tough situations. In Jefferson County, citizens receive 24/7 advanced life support, courthouse services, law enforcement, and county road repairs. And County Commissioner Mark Shainrock says he supports efforts to reduce taxes, but says it's tricky for where the lost revenue would come from after tax reform. Shainrock says it raises the question of how county services will be affected.
Just about every survey that's been taken in our personal experience, Nebraskans value those services that are provided by local government, and they don't want those to be cut. And I think therein is the challenge that we have. If we do cut or eliminate those taxes, then where does the revenue come from to provide those services?
Governor Jim Pillen has called for a 40% reduction in property taxes, making up for the lost revenue with a combination of spending cuts, an increase in state sales tax, and caps on local spending increases. A Douglas County Sheriff's deputy has been charged with sexual assault after being accused of inappropriate conduct with a 16-year-old child. Deputy Juan Casado Moya was working as a resource officer at Elkhorn High School. He'd previously been put on paid administrative leave earlier this month when the accusations first arose. School district officials say they were made aware of the allegations earlier this month and that they immediately reported them to Child Protective Services and the sheriff's office. A Nebraska police chief facing numerous charges after what the local sheriff's office considers an unlawful traffic stop. It happened just outside of Valley. Washington County Attorney Scott Vanderschaff alleges that Valley Police Chief James Deemer pulled someone over more than 20 miles outside his jurisdiction. Law enforcement officials say the person he pulled over was an off-duty law enforcement officer. They say he wasn't given a ticket, just a warning for improper passing. But the traffic stop alone would violate state regulations. Deemer is also accused of facing accusations of driving without a valid Nebraska driver's license. Nebraska's auditor says the Department of Health and Human Services tried to circumvent him by hiring their own hand-picked private accounting firm. During testimony this week on a legislative bill in the state auditor's office, Auditor Mike Foley revealed the effort for the first time. Foley's been critical in audits of the agency in the past, but he called the move by DHHS a, quote, direct assault on the direct authority of his office. DHHS told the Nebraska Examiner this week that the move was made under previous CEO Danette Smith in an effort, in their words, to save taxpayer money. They cited an $830,000 cost for the annual audit by Foley's office, but he says that's fully reimbursed by the federal government. The DHHS says they've since dropped the effort to find an independent CPA. The bullet-blasted Super Bowl celebration in Kansas City left one person dead and 20 others injured, and it's reopened the gun debate in both Missouri and Nebraska. In question, the so-called constitutional carry laws and the good guy with a gun argument. Joe Jordan has our report.
As we've reported, in 2022, Omaha police confiscated nearly 1,500 firearms, helped in part by a city law making the transportation of firearms illegal. Now, a new state law, so-called constitutional carry, has ended that Omaha provision and several others. Enter last week's Super Bowl parade in Kansas City. Bullets flying, hundreds of thousands running for their lives. Kansas City, Missouri, home to constitutional carry before Nebraska, when Omaha's top cop told me this.
There's 500,000 people in Omaha. It's a population certainty that not everybody's going to be able to adjust to that new standard. And I hope that my forecast doesn't come true. I hope that we don't have an incident because of population certainty that comes back to bite us.
But when lawmakers debated constitutional carry last year, Schmatter's concerns were brushed aside, with one neighboring state put first and foremost.
Missouri has big cities. So why our police would be unable to do the same quality work in the same conditions, constitutional carry, as other states and other cities, I do not know.
Look, we're not looking to replicate Kansas City and St. Louis. You can look at their statistics for crime, compare them to Omaha, and there is no comparison.
We have subjects detained, 2 of which are juveniles. We are working to determine the involvement of others. And it should be noted we have recovered several firearms.
And now 2 adults, 2 men have been charged with second-degree murder and other felonies. Prosecutors say Lindell Mays got into an argument with an apparent stranger at the rally and pulled out a gun. They say others did the same and bullets began flying. One gun violence archive says this was at least the 48th mass shooting of the year. Missouri Democrats calling for increased safety regulations, while the state's Republican governor does not.
I don't think this is nothing too new of a conversation for any of us when it comes about the gun laws. I mean, the same problem we're talking about today was the problem we was talking about a year or 2 years ago.
A lot of issues come before.
Senator Brewer continues to stand by constitutional carry and tells me the shooting in Kansas City underscores the need for defenders to be prepared to defend themselves and others. That so-called good guy with the gun theory, all but shot down by Schmatter. Do you buy the good guy with the gun theory?
I suppose there's some truth to it, but there's a tipping point.
How do you know who the good guy is?
Well, you don't always. And obviously our approach to policing has to change because of that as well.
In Omaha, Joe Jordan, News Channel, Nebraska.
The president's border policies remain in the crosshairs as federal lawmakers visit with constituents here in Nebraska. U.S. Senator Pete Ricketts visited the Chocolate Bar in Grand Island yesterday, part of the Junior Senators Border Briefings tour through the state. Ricketts explained his no vote on the recent bipartisan border bill, saying the bill had some things Republicans liked, but said they wanted more checks and balances against President Biden.
The border bill we considered last week did not get the job done. My position is we need to continue to negotiate to get a bill that would help with securing the border and end some of the abuses on the border, like what's going on with parole and asylum. But at the end of the day, the president can do this with his own authority.
Ricketts' Border Briefings tour also stopped in Columbus and Fremont yesterday. A central Nebraska school making history with its show choir. Hastings Unlimited at Hastings High is the first ever show choir in Nebraska to include special needs students in their performances. Show choir directors say it's meant an adjustment in how they prepare for competitions, but they say it's been worth it in the end.
So I think the biggest learning curve was figuring out how to create a group that each student could be successful at their own level and with their own strengths. And that took a couple weeks to kind of figure out. I had to get to know the kids and get to know what they were comfortable with.
And the hard work's paying off. Hastings Unlimited recently finished first place at the Northwest High School Showcase. They're performing a concert at Hastings High School this evening. Well, for the first time in the Midwest, a Nebraska Salvation Army chapter is also launching a Boys and Girls Club. Ryan Pattee has more.
Gathering at the Salvation Army building in Norfolk, a packed room witnessed a ribbon cutting for the new Salvation Army Boys and Girls Club of Norfolk. The first of its kind in the Midwest, the program is a collaboration between the Salvation Army and the Boys and Girls Club of America. The goal of the club is to provide a safe place for the area's growing youth to ensure that they have the support needed so that they can thrive as children and students.
And our goal is, again, to make sure that every child that has to go home to an empty home, or that needs help with their homeworks, or that needs just someone to help them as they're struggling with different things, different stressors in life, that they can come to the Salvation Army. The Salvation Army has always been a safe place.
The Salvation Army hopes this new club will be a positive influence on all who participate, building academic success, character, a healthy lifestyle, and good citizenship.
We hope that our members will take what they learn here and go home and use that in their homes and educate their siblings and their families that they contact every single day.
Each participant of the club can expect a warm meal and a snack, as well as a support group of workers and volunteers there to help them out with whatever they need.
So we want people to trust us with their kids. We've done all of our due diligence, and we're just excited to love them into the kingdom of God and help them to achieve their goals.
The Salvation Army says they can serve up to 25 club members during this first session, but say they have plans to expand up to at least 100 club members once they move buildings to a larger location. The Salvation Army says parents wanting to enroll their child in the program should reach out to them to learn more. In Norfolk, Ryan Pattee, News Channel, Nebraska.
And you can stay up to date with the very latest by following us online. Head to newschannelnebraska.com, click on the News tab there. You can also follow us on X, like us on Facebook and Instagram as well. Thank you so much for joining us. Have a great day. This is News Channel Nebraska.